This podcast is proudly part of the Kaiju Ramen Podcast Network.
If you'd like to check out more kaiju and tokusatsu goodness, go to kaijuRamenmedia.com. Well, as of 2020, he looks like a teenager because I'm looking at it here now.
But
you're right. It is such a
how
weird.
Do you tell if a nut is a teenager?
Maybe when it drops.
New intro song. Wild thing. Dun, 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 dun.
Dun, 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 dun. You make my heart sing.
Wild
you
thing.
make everything. I think I love you.
The wild thing.
But I really want to know for sure.
So come on, baby, and hold me tight.
Come on, baby, light my fire.
No, that's a different song.
That's the wrong band. Oh.
You move.
Come on, baby, light my fire.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Kaiju Weekly, the weekly podcast that introduces you to the wide world of 1960s/70s music.
Yeah, I could. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Yeah, we can do that. It's fine. It applies. A lot of the media that we watch is from the 50s and 60s. So
I am your host, Traps McGee, and with me, as always, is my co-host Michael Spamilton.
Hey, look, do not hate on Spam. I actually like Spam.
Dude, I love Spam.
I do love Spam.
And, you know, we were singing the songs, the wild thing to intro in this episode last night when I was sitting in bed and Daisy, my cat, was sitting in bed next to me. I was thinking about the movie that we're going to review today, and that song clicked in my head, and I immediately started just like, I was just laying in bed, all quiet. All of a sudden I went, wild thing, dun, 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 and it scared Daisy so much she ran out of the room.
I do that. Like I'll just have a random thought, and I'll just like blurt it out, and my cats look at me like I'm crazy.
Oh man. Well, enough chit-chatting away. We have an episode to do. So the first thing we've got to do
is cue the beady beady.
Cue the beady beady. And the first bit of news, actually the first 3 bits of news that we have, it's trailers. We're going to be called the Trailer Park Boys because we've got a ton of trailers to talk about.
You know, sidebar. I have never watched an episode of the Trailer Park Boys.
Me
I'm
neither.
just saying.
Me
I know
neither.
people like that show, but I've just never had the urge to watch it.
Yeah, I've never had the urge to watch it either. Unlike The Office, which I did watch a few episodes of, but just didn't like. So
yeah, I mean, you're one of the few people in America, I believe, that just didn't like The Office, which
yeah.
I'm not saying you're an alien, but it's possible.
Didn't like The Office, didn't like Parks and Rec, even though I like all the people in those shows. I just don't like those shows, but I do love some 30 Rock.
Yeah, 30 Rock was a good show. I think 30 Rock was a good show. Not as much. I like 30 Rock not as much as Parks and Rec. And probably one of my favorite characters from Parks and Rec is Andy. And speaking of Andy, we have Jurassic Park Dominion trailer to talk about for our first news item this week.
Yeah, so this is what was called the Super Bowl trailer, but it actually dropped a little bit before the Super Bowl.
We 2 days or so before, yeah.
Yeah, the trailer for Jurassic World Dominion. And speaking of the Super Bowl, man, that halftime show.
Oh, the halftime show is fantastic. All those songs and all those artists, it took me right back to middle school and in my freshman year of high school.
I read on Twitter somewhere that somebody said, yeah, everybody who was born between 1985 and 1993 was watched the halftime show and was like, yeah, they're finally playing our type of music, not music for the old people. And then it finally dawned on them, oh wait, oh no.
So my thing about the Super Bowl, because they had like Eminem, Dr. Dre, Snoop, Mary J. Blige, and a few others, and then the surprise was 50 Cent, which is more like $1.50 now. But
yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. He's more like $1.50 now.
He's gotten a little pudgy over the years. I guess retirement hasn't treated him too well.
The man is 50-something years old. We can forgive him. He's still true. I mean, he's a 50-something year old man hanging upside down like Spider-Man.
That's true.
We gotta leave 50 Cent alone.
Right. Yeah,
I just thought it was so funny because all the news outlets are saying like, oh yeah, there's with 5 performers for the Super Bowl, there's not going to be any surprise guests. You know, we don't expect any surprise guests, and then 50 Cent just drops in like Spider-Man, like hello, just hanging upside down. Anyway, Jurassic World Dominion. What'd you think of the trailer?
I thought it was to say. I don't want to be all like weird about it and be like, oh, it gave me chills, but it kind of gave me chills because from the perspective of this is literally what the franchise has been building up to. And then just kind of have like John Hammond's voice, you know, do like the voiceover as they're opening up, as they're opening the trailer up. I mean, it was just a really well done trailer, I thought. And, yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it.
We must protect Baby Blue.
We must protect Baby Blue. Like there needs to be a petition. There needs to be a petition, a hashtag, something. Protect Baby Blue. It has to be. If that poor baby dies in the movie, I will riot.
Oh no, they can't. That's like killing the dog. They cannot do that.
No, they're not gonna kill Baby Blue. They may kill Blue, the adult, but they may not kill Baby Blue.
Right. Yeah. No, I just, this era of pop culture is just such a weird time to be in because, you know, we have Baby Yoda, Baby Groot, Baby Mr. Peanut, you know, and now Baby Blue.
Wait, what? Baby Mr. Peanut? There's
you remember
Baby Mr. Peanut now?
Yeah, well, no, it was like a few years ago. He's grown up now, but it was like a few years ago that they rebranded or redid their advertising stuff, and Mr. Peanut died, and they had Baby Mr. Peanut.
Oh, and now he's teenage Mr. Peanut.
I think he's a full-grown adult now. They grow up so fast.
They do. Well, as of 2020, he looks like a teenager because I'm looking at it here now.
But
you're right.
How do you tell if a nut is a teenager?
Maybe when it drops.
Okay. Anyway, so oh goodness! Oh goodness! Oh my lungs! Okay.
That was good.
I really like this trailer too. I completely agree with you that having Richard Attenborough's voice over at the beginning was just a sweet touch, especially, you know, since he's no longer with us and he can't, you know, appear in the movie himself. It's nice to bring it back, that you still have that little touch of John Hammond in the trailer, and the imagery in it looks great. Now I'm still dubious on whether the movie's going to actually be good because I don't know. I didn't completely hate Fallen Kingdom, but I wasn't completely thrilled by it either. I was kind of in the middle towards it. And it just seems like each Jurassic World movie now, has just had diminishing returns on it. And so I'm kind of, dubious on whether this one's going to actually be good. But as far as the imagery,
I mean, they could have stopped after the first Jurassic World, because I really like because Jurassic Park 3, although has grown on me over the years, Jurassic Park 3, I believe, is still the weakest of the franchise, in my opinion. I still think it's the weakest. I think obviously the strongest is the original. Lost World is a really close second, because Lost World was a lot of fun. And then probably the first Jurassic World, and then Jurassic Park 3 being the weakest of those four. But
where would you put Fallen Kingdom?
Fallen Kingdom's tough, because Fallen Kingdom was a lot of fun. Fallen Kingdom was, to me, a lot like Godzilla vs. Kong was. It was a lot of fun. There wasn't a ton of substance there, but it was still fun enough to watch. But it could have been, but it probably was. It was probably a little bit weaker. I would say it's probably a little bit weaker than maybe even Jurassic Park 3. So I take that back. It's probably Fallen Kingdom is the weakest of the franchise so far.
Yeah, Fallen Kingdom and the first Jurassic World kind of go back and forth on being like at the bottom of the list, because there's parts of both of them that I liked, and there's a lot in both of them that I didn't like. So it's kind of hard to like decide which one I liked and didn't like. But yeah, the visuals in this trailer were great. I love, and I don't know how to pronounce I may pronounce it wrong, but Parasaurolophus, whatever, the dinosaur that's like it's like a duckbill one with the long thing on its head. The guy in Lost World called it Elvis because it had the big curl.
Yeah, it's gonna bug me until I think of the name. But anyway, let's move on. But I know what you're talking. Elvis. Yeah. We'll just call it Elvis.
Yeah, but those dinosaurs, when they had a bunch of them running through like this snowy plains and running alongside horses and being corralled around, and you had Chris Pratt there, kind of corralling them in. It's just like, it was really cool. That was such a cool visual. Of course, we did see the preview of this movie a while back with the T-Rex at the drive-in theater, so we got a little bit of that in there. But the big thing that everybody's been talking about with this trailer is, of course, the return of Ellie Sattler and Dr. Grant, along with Malcolm.
Yep. And they look they don't look exactly the same, but they're dressed exactly the same from the first
one. The clothing that they're wearing is the same, but they do look different. Not saying that they look bad. The time has passed. And you can tell
I'm not.
The time has passed, but they're not like old looking. They look good. And
I'm not going to complain about the fact that Dr. Grant's plaid shirt looks exactly almost the same as Dr. Grant's plaid shirt in the original film. I think that's a stupid thing to critique and argue about, honestly. But I don't know. I think bringing them in is a nice touch to help kind of round out the series, because this is going to be the last movie, supposedly. Depending on how it does. It'll all depend on how it does, and if there's more money to be made from it. But this is going to be the last movie, so this movie is really kind of a big deal. Like, we could potentially be seeing maybe like I don't want to say Godzilla versus Kong event, where they just kind of throw everything at us, and then there you go, they go out with a bang, that kind of stuff. But I am happy to see Ellie, Dr. Grant, and Malcolm back for this movie. I think it's, like I said, it's a nice touch. It's a nice way to round out the series. And I think although yes, it's a little bit of fan service, but I think hopefully it'll be used well.
Yeah. And somebody did bring up the question of like, how much of this is real nostalgia like us, getting excited to see them back, and how much of it is just kind of like manufactured by the studio to make us feel nostalgic for this, and how far is that nostalgia going to go? Is it going to actually translate to, actual numbers in the thing? Because like, I was one of those dinosaur kids who loved dinosaurs and loved Jurassic Park. I absolutely was obsessed with Jurassic Park. But when I think back to the fond memories I have of Jurassic Park, it's not Dr. Sadler, Dr. Grant, and Dr. Malcolm who I'm thinking of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's the dinosaurs. Yeah. So
it's
the
kids. It's the animals.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, like I get people's excitement, and like I'm glad to see them back too, because it is kind of nice to see them. Anytime you see Jeff Goldblum or Laura Dern or anyone in a movie, it's going to be it's good because they're good actors. But is it really worth the excitement that people have? Like, oh, I have been waiting my whole life to see them again in a movie. It's like, really?
No, I don't think so. I really don't think so, because we've had some really good actors and actresses in the Jurassic Park and Jurassic World series, and there are some really iconic actors. Like, I know a lot of people like to hate on Chris Pratt, but I love Chris Pratt. I think Chris Pratt is a solid actor in his own right. He's an entertaining guy, and I like the original trio of Dr. Grant, Malcolm, and Ellie, Dr. Sadler. And I'm kind of with you. I'm more nostalgic for just the animals themselves than I am like the human characters. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some really iconic moments with those human characters that I can think of. One specifically is Dr. Grant putting his ear to the Triceratops and listening to it breathe. Like, that is that is a fond memory from that first movie. Dr. Malcolm telling them, Dr. Malcolm, his speech about first there's running and screaming and eating. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah. At first it's the oohing and the awing, then it's the running and the screaming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I love those characters, but I'm happy that they're back. I'm just not super nostalgic for those characters.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and that's not to diminish, their involvement in the movie, obviously. I mean, we wouldn't, the quotes that we quote from the movie all come from these characters. Without these characters in the movie, we wouldn't be able to quote anything other than roars and screeches. So, I mean,
that's a great big polish.
Yeah. Yeah. Life finds a way. But yeah, I don't know. To me, it feels like the hype, the amount of hype that people are giving them returning just feels almost like not forced, but almost like manufactured, because I just don't think that there was a lot of nostalgia for these characters until the studio said, hey, you remember these characters? We're bringing them back. Oh, now I suddenly have all these fond and, wonderful things about these characters, and I can't live without these characters coming back. It's like, I don't know. I think
this is in no way to diminish the Jurassic Park franchise, but really we're kind of here to see the dinosaurs, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, and one of the dinosaurs that is making a return is the Spitter, the Dilophosaurus.
Yes. And it's a practical effect too.
It's a practical effect.
Yes. Did you see the behind the scenes photo that the guy that worked on it posted? That it is the Dilophosaurus is an actual like practical effect. I'm sure that there's going to be some CGI involved.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But the frill opening and the spitting, that's going to be a practical effect, and I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah. So, lots of excitement. I am really excited for it. I'm just kind of tempering my excitement with the realization that the last couple of movies haven't really super thrilled me. So kind of tempering it a little bit, but I am excited for it nonetheless. Moving on to the next bit of news, because we do have a good bit of news, so we need to get through this. The trailer for Dawn Brothers, the new Super Sentai series, dropped. I mean, we've seen a lot of photos, we've seen a lot of clips, we have a full trailer that they put out. This is, I mean, to me,
weird.
Yeah, to me, Toei is purposely making Super Sentai series that are just absolutely impossible for an American Power Rangers adaptation. Because with, was it Zenkaiger was just absolutely just like, I don't know how you could even adapt that to Power Rangers. And then this is impossible. You cannot adapt this into Power Rangers. We've talked about it because we saw the photos of this, so we've already kind of talked a lot about this. But what did you think of the trailer for it?
I mean, it looks okay. So I've watched a little bit of Zenkaiger. It's weird. But it's fun to some degree. I've only seen a few episodes. If I can track down episodes to this, I'll watch it. But I just am so turned off by the fact that the Pink Ranger and the Black Ranger are full on CGI. Like that I think that turns me off the most out of all of it, because and I hope I hope it'll get better, but Japanese CGI is not great. So, and I don't even know what it is about it, but it just doesn't look as good as what we're doing here in the States as far as CGI goes. Like Japan excels so well at practical effects, but they kind of falter in their CGI. And I know Shin Godzilla is sort of the exception, because Shin Godzilla did look good for the most part, but like I don't have high expectations for the CGI, for the full CGI Rangers in this. Like I'm just kind of disappointed that they went this route. But again, I'm probably not going to be the audience for it.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah. We're not the audience for this. Something that I didn't realize until I was looking up information about this series, but this series is actually because every Super Sentai series draws inspiration from somewhere, whether it be dinosaurs or whatever they're themed around.
Sure.
And this one's actually themed around the Japanese legend or story of Momotaro. And I didn't know that. Now suddenly a lot of the things make sense. Terrible CGI.
Is that the Monkey King?
No. That's not Monkey King. That's actually a Chinese legend, Journey to the West.
Okay.
It has Monkey King in it. No, Momotaro is Peach Boy. It's about a boy who was it was a couple who wanted a child, who they were too old to have a child. This is the version of the story I heard anyway. And then they open up, they find this big peach. They open up the peach and there's a boy inside. And they raise him, and then he goes off when he gets older, goes off on adventures, and he makes friends. So he makes friends with a monkey, he makes friends with a dog and a bird. And that's the ones that I know of. I can't think of what the other ones, what the other characters are. And if you look at the Dawn Brothers,
is it a dragon?
I don't know what it is.
Does he make friends with it? Is he make fun? I was trying to think. Okay, because so obviously the red Ranger is the boy,
right? And
the Pink Ranger is the bird. The Pink Ranger is the bird. The Black Ranger is the dog / fox. I guess a wolf, whatever. The Blue Ranger is the monkey, because it looks like a baboon with its little red butt.
Right.
And the Yellow Ranger, she has spikes on her. So I'm not 100% sure what she's supposed to be. At first, I saw people trying to say she was like a snapping turtle or something, which I think there are snapping turtles in Japanese lore. I think that's part of it. But something else, I don't know. I don't know if she's supposed to be like a turtle.
I thought a cat. I thought she was more of a cat, but she could be a turtle. Could be, she could be, if I remember right. No, Momotaro wasn't the one that was that had the learned frog magic. So I don't think she's a frog. I really don't know. I really don't know. I need to I need to go back and
Mm.
look up Momotaro and see the story again. But I remember bits and pieces of it, not the whole thing, but I did learn a little bit about it. I know that it was used in World War II as propaganda, for so that's fun. But anyway, so the character designs start to make a little bit more sense once I realized that that's what the theme of this series was. But at the same time, I am with you. Japanese CGI is not that great to begin with. It's okay, it's serviceable for the most part, but they just don't have the big huge studios and the amount of money and the willingness to abuse the people who work on these things like the American studios do. So, and force them to work overtime.
That's another discussion for another time.
Yes. But so they just don't have the level of CGI that American studios do, and especially for television. So it is kind of weird to have two characters that are fully CGI in this in the series.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm not going to probably watch it. I might watch like the first. I'll do like what I did with Zenkaiger, which is watch the first couple of episodes and then drop off. But yeah, like we said, this is not. We're not the audience for this, and so that's okay. It does look weird. It makes me more and more believe the rumors, which is that the rift between Toho and Toei and Hasbro are growing, and that there's the likelihood that they're not going to adapt many more of these Super Sentai series into Power Rangers and start doing more original Power Rangers, because it just feels like Toei is starting to go in a direction where it's like, yeah, we don't have to try to make this into something that can appeal to American audiences as well.
Yeah, that's been the rumor for a while. It's not confirmed that they're going to do that, but kind of the signs are there that, eventually Power Rangers as we know it will cease to exist. Because at this point, I think we talked about it on our crossover episode with the Henshin Men. I think that's when we talked about. I know we've talked about it on this podcast before, but the use of Sentai footage has just more or less become a tradition than a requirement at this point.
Yeah, and it always comes down to money. How much money is Hasbro willing to fork out to use that footage? How much money can they put towards developing their own stuff that they don't need Toei's footage? And there's a lot of logistics and stuff behind it, but I do feel like that is the direction that things are going. So if the announcement, we don't know for sure that that's the direction it's going, but that's what it looks like to us that it's going. So if they made the announcement like tomorrow that Toei and Hasbro are no longer going to, they're not going to work together to make Power Rangers. Power Rangers is going to now be completely original, completely wholly US made, not using Super Sentai footage, I wouldn't be surprised. It would not surprise me.
No, I would be kind of sad. Maybe not sad, but just kind of like, oh, well, that's kind of the end of a long era. It's like the end of like a 30-year tradition.
Moving on to the next bit of news, we had another trailer for the comedy horror film Crabs. This is an independent horror comedy film that's coming out, and it's about giant crab creatures that attack a town and kill people, and basically it's just a big gore fest that's meant to be funny.
Let me tell you, if this movie does not encourage you to practice safe sex, I don't think anything will.
I think the movie Teeth probably would have made me want to practice that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Who?
Oh,
Anyway,
ooh, like there's a lot of commentary.
Does
in
that
Teeth,
count
but,
as kaiju?
I mean, maybe, but do you really want to cover that on the podcast?
No, I don't. No, I don't really. No. So this movie, like, it looks dumb, but I mean, like, that's the point. It's meant to be kind of campy and dumb. It's not for me because it does lean a little too heavy into the gore side of horror. I don't mind horror films that are more psychological or, just monster related, but are not super gory. I'm not a big fan of just big gore fests. I just, that just doesn't appeal to me. And this is definitely like a huge gore fest.
Yeah, it looks okay. Honestly, it looks like an Asylum film. I don't know who's making this thing. Is Asylum making this thing?
Oh, no. This is not an Asylum film.
Okay. Well, it looks better. I was going to say it looks better than like an Asylum movie. I thought it was an Asylum movie, honestly. But it looks better than an Asylum movie. It just looks dumb. So for that reason, we're probably going to cover it on the podcast.
The way it was described online is Zombievers meets Godzilla. And this is definitely more in the Zombievers side of things than a Godzilla side of things.
Well, there is apparently a giant mech. So there's that.
There is a giant. Well, there's giant. There is giant. The giant crab. I am not seeing who made this or who's putting it out. I mean, yeah, it's not telling me. Why am I not able to find out what studio is putting this out? I know it's an independent.
Well, eventually, yeah. Well, we know that this will wind up on Walmart shelves at some point eventually, if not SRS. I don't know. This may be even a little bit too dignified for SRS. Who knows? I don't know what else to say about it. It looks nuts. It looks like a big gore fest, like you and I talked about, like a lot of body horror. And the premise is giant crabs, which we don't get a whole lot. I will probably watch this and go into it expecting to be either disappointed, pleasantly surprised, or yeah, that's what I thought. Which I'm probably going to be leaning towards. Yeah, that's what I thought.
But yeah, here's the movie info for people who are interested, and because like there is an audience for this type of thing, and just because we're not the audience doesn't mean that you can't enjoy it, and that's perfectly fine. So here's the info. It says, get ready for shell shock. It's the Zombievers meets Godzilla hybrid you always craved in the creature feature comedy horror of the year. Mutated by nuclear runoff, a horde of murderous horseshoe crabs descend on a sleepy California town, causing prom night terror. As the deadly crustaceans claw their way through the disbelieving population, it's up to a ramshackle band of students and local law enforcement to address the increasingly ginormous crab menace in a love letter to such practical effects horrors as Gremlins and nostalgic Roger Corman classics. Okay, I feel like they're trying too hard. This is my problem with these movies sometimes, is like they want to feel like they're not trying at all, which is kind of the humor of it. It's like, look how stupid we are because we're not even putting any effort into this. But also they feel like they're trying too hard to get people's attention. Like they mentioned Zombievers, Godzilla, Gremlins, Roger Corman, Prom Night. They are mentioning all these other things that are supposed to make you go, ooh, because, these are things I know and I like. I don't know. I don't know. This movie is definitely not for me.
Yeah. I mean, I know you don't like movies. Like, I can have fun with movies like this, but I know you don't like them. I think you said on the podcast that you like movies that go in trying to make a good movie and it just ends up being a bad movie. It sounds like they're just trying to make a schlocky bad movie.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Cause like, some of the best so bad they're good movies were not movies that were intended to be bad. Some of them maybe, but not all of them were. Like they went into it with the idea of making something good and then just failed so miserably that it's funny. And it's and the movie is funny, but this just feels like, I don't know, and even like in the trailer, some of the jokes just seemed too, like they were trying too hard. Like they're trying too hard to be like, we're silly, we're goofy, huh? It's like, no. That's not the type of comedy that I like. I like smart comedy, and this is just and I like dumb movies too, but again, I like movies that are dumb in a smart way, I guess is the best way to put it, and I don't know how else to describe that. And this just seems dumb in a dumb way to me.
Right. It's the two companies that are putting it out are, as I guess we guessed, they're already small. It's the Ojala Productions, I hope I'm saying that right, and Young Gunner Films is who is putting this thing out.
Okay.
Thank you, Danny.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, this movie's not for me, but if it's for you, great. I'm glad that you can enjoy it, and it's out there, but it's in the world of giant monsters, and so the trailer dropped, and we had to talk about it, and we may have to cover it on the podcast at some point. I mean, I've already kind of spoiled. Maybe watching it won't actually be so bad. This is all just judgment, just based on the trailers. So maybe if we watch it for the podcast, it might change my mind. I don't know. But to me, I'm not. This does not seem like the type of movie I would enjoy. Moving on, just a quick bit of news.
I was going to say, but speaking of something we know we will enjoy.
Yes. So it's been announced that A Quiet Place 3 is in development, but it is said that it will not be ready or out until 2025, which just feels, and it's only 3 years, but that still feels forever.
I know it does. You know why it does? Because I feel like we've had like this monster boom lately, and we're heading for, and I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer, but I feel like we're heading for that lull period where we're not going to get much as far as like bigger budget monster movies. So we're going to get a bunch of independent films, which
I'll tell you why it feels like it's going to be forever till 2025, because it's still 2019. Like, we haven't left 2019 for the last 3 years. It's still 2019. That's why 2025 feels like forever. We've been stuck in 2019 for the last 3 years.
Yeah. But yeah, I feel like we're heading into this. I feel like we're going to get a lull period where we're not going to get like big budget monster movies for a while. And what's going to keep, and I've said this on the podcast before, what's going to keep the genre alive is independent films like Crabs and
A Quiet Place.
All the other like A Quiet Place, and like I like the stuff coming out of SRS, like Great Buddha Arrival and Nezera and Howl from Beyond the Fog. Those types of films I think are going to help keep the genre alive and stable until we can get something more down the line. That's just my perspective. I don't know. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah. What gets me is because the first movie, the amount of time between the first and second movie was like only a year, as far as like getting it filmed and done was like a year.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a little bit longer for the second one to be released because of COVID, but it still was done in like a year after the first one came out. So why are they taking so long for this third one? Here's my thinking on this. So I'm still not 100% sold on the rumors that John Krasinski and Emily Blunt are going to be playing Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman in the Fantastic Four, but I do believe that they are involved in a Marvel production of some kind, whether that be Fantastic Four or whether that be something else. I don't know, but I do think that they're involved in something big like that, and so maybe that's what's pushing this back some, because they can't work on this until they get done with the bigger thing that they're already doing that's also hush hush and secret, and that's why they're not saying it.
I think you're right that they are involved in something a little bit bigger, and that's what's going to delay this thing for 3 years. Because I know I'm not trying to denigrate what goes into making a movie like this, but it's a pretty small cast, I would assume. Like The Quiet Place is not a big casted movie, and they film on, and I feel like you said, they were able to pump out the first one pretty quickly. They're able to do the second one, I should say, pretty quickly apart from the first one. And it has to be just a mix of other projects they're working on, extra precautions, due to COVID, that kind of stuff that's delaying this thing.
I mean, we're in a world where we've had 2 Sonic the Hedgehog movies that have come out in the midst of the pandemic. So the fact that
Oh God,
A Quiet Place 3 is taking this long to get going and get actually out means that there's got to be something going on behind the scenes, whether that's Fantastic Four, them getting involved in that, or just involved in something bigger that's taking up that time so that they have to push this smaller project back. That's all I wanted to say about that. As far as like the date, to me, being 3 years away, not only does it feel like forever, but it also seems like that kind of answers the question that a lot of people have been asking. Are they involved in something big with like Marvel or Disney or Warner Brothers and DC, or one of those, big powerhouse company franchises that are taking over the world? And so, so that's all that I have to say. I mean, there's nothing really more to say about this. It's just the announcement that it is in development. Yay! But it's still going to take a while. Boo! Okay.
Yay!
Moving on to the next bit of news. Bandai has opened up voting for the next Movie Monster series figure. So Bandai has been putting out these Movie Monster series figures for a while. They're really cool. They're on the cheaper side of things, more on my level. Thank you very much. And now they've opened up the voting for the next one that they're going to put out. Michael, you know more about this than I do, so take over and tell us about it.
Yeah, it's just really quick. I'm just gonna breeze through this really quickly. So for the last few years, Bandai has been doing voting for what's going to be the next Movie Monster series. It's the whole reason why we got a brand new like Gorosaurus figure, and the whole and why we got an actual like Megalon figure a couple of years back. So they're taking votes, and I don't have the list in front of me, but I think it is Gabara, Varan, Ebera, Kumonga, Super Mecha Godzilla from 1990, from the Heisei era. Who else? Minya, another Titanosaurus, and there's someone else that I'm forgetting, but I'm blanking on it right now. Oh, Kamacuras. So as of right now, and as of the vote, Super Mechagodzilla is winning, and a lot of fans are complaining because it's like, oh, we already have like 120 Super Mechagodzillas out in the wild. Give us Varan or someone that has not had good representation in the form of a Bandai figure ever in a long time, or if ever. So I voted actually for Gabara. I don't know why. I just thought a Gabara figure could be pretty cool. I don't know. I just like the design of Gabara. So
yeah, I was going to ask you which one you were going to vote for. So Gabara's the one you voted for.
I think, yeah, I voted for Gabara. I know a lot of people voted for Varan.
I'm surprised you didn't vote for Manila.
No, I don't like that ugly little freak all that much. I see a lot of people that have voted and they're super mad that Super Mecha G is winning because it's led people to complain like, Bandai must have like a stockpile of Super Mecha G's in their warehouse they just want to get rid of. Which could be the case. I don't know. Who knows? Anyway, that's that. So we can move on to the next quick little collector's news item, which is Super 7 is totally killing it with their lines. And Super 7 is a lot. You'll know Super 7 for doing the very nostalgic lines of toys. Like I think their biggest line right now is the reaction figures, which is like the little 4 to 5 inch figures and they do like pop culture icons. They have everything from like The Simpsons to Planet of the Apes to Rick and Morty to the Munsters. They did a reaction line of the Munsters of all things.
Okay, yeah. I'm looking it up now. I know it. I know these. Yeah.
They're like these little tiny 4 to 5 inch figures. They just put out a bunch of stuff for Power Rangers and Transformers, but their bigger line of toys, which they call their Super Cyborg line, is putting out a Mechagodzilla 1974. And the Super Cyborg line are about 11 to 12 inches tall. So they're going to be putting out a version of Mechagodzilla 74 for that line, and a Dragon Zord to go along with the Megazord that they put out last year. Which I like them. I have a few of the Super Cyborg. They don't feel cheap, but they are just hollow plastic. They are just like hollow plastic collectibles. They are not meant to be played with. Even on the box that you get them, this is not a toy. Don't play with this. But they're nice figures. They're fairly affordable. They're like anywhere between $75 to $80.
Yeah, it looks like they're like recreating like the Kenner look to Kenner action figure.
Good way. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Like if anyone out there remembers like the old Kenner Star Wars toys that come in the bubble packs, it's like those. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Megazord one now. It looks really cool.
I have the screen accurate paint one and the all red translucent one.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I got them from our friend at Kaiju Live, AJ. He gave me a pretty good deal on those.
Ooh, this gold painted Optimus Prime in the bubble pack, Kenner style thing. That looks nice.
Yeah, they have a really they have like an all chrome Megatron. I've seen them, they pop up a lot at Targets. Like Target does a lot of Super 7 stuff. And the whole thing with Super 7 is they lean really heavy into nostalgia.
Right. Yeah.
Really, really heavy into nostalgia.
Well, yeah, like I said, they're recreating kind of the Kenner action figure look. It looks like all of the properties that they have that they're releasing. It's like you said, you have Transformers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They even have some Who Framed Roger Rabbit figures. Yeah.
I saw those the other day. Ghostbusters.
Yeah, I'm just looking through all the different things that they have in here. I mean, they're nice. They are nice. So yeah, that's cool. Not super duper expensive either, because they seem to, like you said, they're more on the cheaper side as far as like the figures themselves, so they can keep their price point kind of at a reasonable rate.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think the reaction figures, depending on what you get, they're like anywhere between like $16 to $24. I know that they just put out their line of Power Ranger toys, and I don't have any of these. They're a little bit too small for what I like, but the Power Ranger stuff is like $18, and the Megazord, like the Dragon Zord and the Megazord, is like $24. And for what they are, it's a little bit too expensive. But if you're like a box collector and you don't plan, and you're like one of those people that just collects things, and leaves them in the packaging and admires them for what they are, then these are great. Like these are things you're going to like want to hang. Like I know, people have the hooks on the wall and they hang their little bubble packs of toys like this. If that's what you're into, reaction figures are great because I think like the art is spectacular on these.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, that's really quick. That's more time than I really wanted to spend on it, but yeah, it's super. We're getting Mechagodzilla and Dragonzord, which is really exciting. I'll probably pick up both of them.
Nice. Yeah, I would love if I have the money at the time, I wouldn't mind getting the Dragonzord one. That looks cool. Yeah, so that's cool. Quick bit of news. The next bit of news is something that we forgot to mention last week because our friend and former guest host, who's been on here quite a few times now and is going to be on here again and at a future episode, but shh, we haven't talked about that yet. Shh. Sam, Dr. Sam Perrin, he sent us a bit of news to talk about, which is we had a species of branching worm that was discovered over in Japan. It says it was discovered in Japan's Sado Island, off the coast of Japan's Sado Island. And it was named after King Ghidorah. Its scientific name is Ramacillus kingidorai.
Which is really funny and really interesting at the same time because I feel like they gave it that name because of the Noodle King Ghidorah from the anime trilogy,
right?
Which would make a ton of sense. Because I looked up what a branching worm was, and it does make a lot of sense that they would call it King Ghidorah. It's just kind of funny that we're getting like an actual animal or actual thing in biology named King Ghidorah, and it's not just a fantasy dragon anymore.
Yeah. Well, that's what's interesting because if you look at the picture of what a branching worm looks like, because it branches out like a tree, it has like little branches that come off of it. It does kind of look like the little noodle Ghidorah things that we saw in the anime trilogy. The funny thing is, though, those are not heads. Those are actually its butts. It only has one head, but it has the branches end in multiple butts. So that's an interesting bit of biology.
That's okay.
Which does beg the question. Ghidorah has 3 heads, no arms, 2 tails. How many butts? Or does he have a cloaca?
I'm going to say cloaca. Cloaca. That's the little like flap that hides the penis, right?
No.
The thing?
No. A cloaca is is the poop hole and the reproductive hole.
Oh, okay.
It's like a lot of birds and lizards and stuff have that because they don't have separate like some like most mammals and stuff will have separate parts of the body. That we're getting way too deep into this for just a silly bit of
we are.
Anyway, I did want to mention this is not the first time that a real life animal has been named after a thing from pop culture. Definitely not. A lot of animals that are discovered in nature are named after things in pop culture. But this is also not the first time that a Toho monster has been used in naming a thing. And if you hear the dogs clicking and clacking in the background, it's just the doggy walking by.
No, he's fine. He needs his little nails clipped. It's fine.
Yeah. But we have had, I don't think they still use it, but there was a Godzillasaurus for a little while. But I think that species has been identified as something else, or like it was actually something else that was already identified. So that name doesn't apply to it anymore. But there was actually a spider just a few years ago that was named after Kumanga.
Yeah, I remember. Didn't we cover that?
I think we
Covered that, didn't
did.
we?
I think we did. I think it was one of
I
our
think.
early topics, or not early, but
Yeah.
early news items. Science is weird and scientists are nerds. Anyway, probably the biggest news, and oh boy, man, it has taken a while to get down to this point, but I'm gonna probably edit a bunch of stuff out, so we'll be all right.
Yeah.
The biggest news that we had this week, at least in the Godzilla slash Kaiju Tokusatsu world, is the announcement that there is a Shin Universe collaboration project, whatever you want to call it, that is titled Shin Japan Heroes Universe, that has been announced. So this is working with Hideaki Anno, who has been involved, not directed, but involved in Shin Godzilla, Shin Ultraman, Shin Kamen Rider, which still hasn't come out. Well, Shin Ultraman still hasn't come out, and the revival slash remake of Evangelion, which is called Shin Evangelion. And so they're combining those 4 properties together into a big collaboration calling it Shin Japan Heroes Universe.
So here's my okay. I am trying to tamper my expectations, because do we know if this is going to be like, have they said anything about it being like actual films, television shows, or is what I'm suspecting it is just merchandise?
So that's what I wanted to talk about a little bit. I want to put this out there and I know no one is who I'm actually addressing this to is actually listening to us, but I'm still going to put this out into the universe just so that hopefully somebody can hear this. Sure. There's been a lot of clickbait articles that have said, oh, they're doing this shared universe Marvel style movie crossover where all these movies are going to, come together and they're going to be one big huge thing. That is not what they have said. Nowhere in the announcement for this, in Japanese and translated to English, have they said that this is a shared universe, cinematic universe thing that is happening. What our friend G-Man from the Drift Space podcast lovingly referred to as the Shinematic universe. But they nowhere have they mentioned that this is going to be movies or a cinematic thing. We don't know exactly what this is yet because they haven't actually said. So here is the announcement from the website. It was written in Japanese and translated to English, so it's a little bit broken. Some of it doesn't really make a lot of sense, but I'll read it out how they have it, and we'll see what they say. So it says, in 2022, the Shin era begins to move. Shin Japan Heroes Universe, a miracle project in which 4 works, Shin Godzilla, Shin Evangelion theatrical version, Shin Ultraman, and Shin Kamen Rider collaborate will start. So collaboration will start. So this is a collaboration between these different, properties. We know that much. This project was launched by Toho, Color, Subaraya Productions, and Toei. From the connection of the work with Shin, in which the rare creator Hideaki Anno participates, the dream collaboration of 4 heroes, I wouldn't call Shin Godzilla a hero, but okay, representing Japan has been realized beyond the boundaries of the company. Starting with Shin Godzilla, in 2016, Shin Evangelion theatrical version was released in 2021 as a standby work on May 13th, 2022. Shin Ultraman will be released on the day, and Shin Kamen Rider will be released in March 2023. The main visual of this project is Maeda. The emblem is by Yutaka Izubuchi. and 2 people who are deeply involved in each series will color the launch of this large-scale project. And that's it. That's all that we know as of right now. This is a collaboration work between multiple companies centered around kind of the creative direction, I guess, of Hideaki Anno, who's participated in all of these things in one way or another, whether being director, screenplay writer, producer, all that kind of stuff. And we don't know. I am on the side of this is going to be merchandise. This is going to be a big, huge, which, like, I know that after hearing the words cinematic universe and movie crossovers, the idea of merchandise is kind of a little bit of a downstep. But the idea that you're doing merchandise that is a collaboration between 4 big companies in Japan.
Like, how they got Subaraya and Toei to work together is beyond me.
Toho, Subaraya, and Toei together, working together, is just like, these 3 companies do not play well together or play well with others generally, from experience of seeing how they've worked with other companies before, and they're collaborating together to do something. We don't know exactly what it is, but they're doing something. That's a big deal.
It is. That's a huge deal. It's a huge deal. And I was having this conversation with somebody the other day, and they were asking me just to give my opinion. And I said, like you, it's going to be merchandise. I don't think we're going to see a film anytime soon. I don't think we're going to see honestly, I don't think we're going to see a film ever. I don't even think we're going to get a television special. I think it's going to be merchandise. I honest to God think it's just going to be merchandise, and that's it. But they asked me what if. So I'm going to just say what if here. If they did do a film, and how I would personally write it, I would make Shin Godzilla the bad. I would make Shin Godzilla the villain, the antagonist. He would be the threat they have to that Ultraman, Kamen Rider, and Eva 1 would have to be put up against to stop. But here's the caveat: if they did do that and they wanted to make another theatrical Shin Godzilla movie, I should say, then they could maybe play around with those really unique ideas that they had from the original Shin, where they had like the humanoid creatures growing out of its tail. And that could be like you could have an army of humanoid Godzillas and like the actual Godzilla facing off against Ultraman and Kamen Rider and Eva 1, but that's pie in the sky stuff. I'm with you. I think it's going to be merchandise. Like, I know people are like, oh, it's a cinematic universe. And every time us in the West, as Americans, we hear collaboration, we automatically think, oh, it's a cinematic universe. No, it's not. It's going to be merchandise.
And to be fair, because I have seen some people on Twitter actually use that as like an insult or a complaint against Western, fans who are just always jumping at the cinematic universe, shared universe thing.
Yeah.
To be fair, it's because we've been trained that way. We are the dogs.
Oh, yeah.
It's a Pavlovian response that we have after being trained for now over a decade that every big franchise needs to become a cinematic universe to be successful, and it's not just the comic book movies that have done it. It's also, the Star Wars and even Star Trek with all of its branching different series and all being part of the shared universe thing. Yeah. And
and soon Power Rangers.
Yeah. Power Rangers is starting to do its own cinematic universe, and the Universal Monsters they've been trying for years to do a cinematic universe with them. And it's just like, so like, don't use that as like an insult for us when we're just being trained by the studios. They're the ones that have actually like trained us to be this way, to react to things this way. But no, I do think that it is definitely a big leap for people to go out and say, oh, this is definitely going to happen. It's a cinematic shared universe. It's like, no, that's not what they said. more than likely it's just going to be merchandise. We're not 100% sure. They haven't actually said. Again, just the idea of these companies working together, that's just a big deal, period. Because what does that mean for the future? What does that mean for the future? Could we, if this itself is not a crossover movie thing, the fact that these companies are working together, could we in the future get Ultraman versus Godzilla, or Godzilla versus Kamen Rider, or any of the combinations that we've seen? Like this may not be the shared universe that everybody was hyping up, but it does open the door. It does mean that, hey, these companies are showing that they're working together, so there's a possibility for something in the future.
Yeah, it opens the door, and there's one studio that's being left out here. One major studio that's being left out. That is Daiei Katakawa.
Yes, and to be fair, because Hideaki Anno hasn't done anything for Katakawa yet.
Sure.
I say yet because, much like our friend Brandon McClure from the Fake Nerds podcast, I am still like desperately pleading for a Shin Gamera directed by, or at least in some way involving, Hideaki Anno.
I think it's gonna happen eventually. My feeling is it's gonna happen eventually. If he's done all these 4 major franchises at this point. Shin Gamera is the one he hasn't done yet, or hasn't touched yet. I mean, it's only, in my opinion, it's only a matter of time.
Yeah, I mean, he also hasn't touched a Super Sentai yet, so that's also the thing.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, that's really, I don't know what else to say about this other than the artwork that they put out for this looks amazing and is going to be my new phone background.
Yeah, it's beautiful artwork, and it honestly, I can see why people are excited about it, and why people are kind of drawing their own conclusions from this. Like there's a lot of potential with something like this. I just don't think it's not going to be what we're all hoping it's going to be. And it's just going to be merchandise. And I hate to be that guy, but I sincerely don't think it's going to be anything other than just merchandise.
Yeah. Which merchandise, like we said, that's not a bad thing, that this is happening. It's just that once you have the thought of a cinematic universe, a Shin-nematic universe, the idea of it just being merchandise is kind of a step down, but like the idea of merchandise that features Godzilla and Ultraman and Kamen Rider, actual licensed stuff that has these characters together, I think it's really cool. And who knows what the plan is. But yeah, it is just interesting. It is an interesting time. I just think it's really neat that 2022 so far has been the year of the crossover, because we've got this crossover, we've also got the Godzilla versus the Power Rangers crossover, and who knows what other crossovers we'll see in the future. Moving on to our main topic now. Finally. A lot of that's probably going to get cut out. So, hello, me who is editing this podcast and going to cut all of this thing out and spend all night working on this episode because we are doing this at the very, 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 very last minute. We like to introduce our main topics with a trivia question that we ask at the end of each episode that hints to what we're covering. So the trivia question I asked last week was, what 1963 children's book was adapted into an animated short film, a live-action movie, and an opera? And we had a bunch of fun answers. So let's get through some of these answers. Starting with one of our favorite listeners who likes to send us all kinds of things and interact with us on Twitter, Chris Deggle, who sent in The Very Hungry Caterpillar, aka the unofficial origin story of Batra.
I remember reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar as a kid. And it's a really good answer. Thanks, Chris.
That is a very good answer. I thought that was very creative. Very good. Very good, sir. Moving on to, I want to say this person's name as Terry Hesticles, but I'm pretty sure it's meant to be read as Terry Hesticles.
Yep.
Anyway, he sent us Charlotte's Web.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you very much. Good answer. Not the correct answer, but good answer. Another one of our favorite listeners who interacts with us a lot on social media,
Damon Noise.
Damon Noise sent the Hungry Kaiju Pillar. Thank you, Damon.
And then we got this guy from this other podcast that I don't know what he lives on an island with monsters, something. He wrote in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Thanks, guy from that podcast.
Who we've never
Nathan,
heard of or talked to.
Who we've never heard of or talked to at all. No, not
he's never. It's not
like he's
guested
the co-host
on this podcast so many times.
Which he's not been on this podcast. Well, he's not been on this podcast in a while, but we do have other shows with him involved. So
yeah.
We're not trying to be mean, audio listener. We're talking about Nathan of the Monster Island Film Vault podcast. Thank you, Nate. Appreciate it. We're just busting your balls a little bit, buddy.
And speaking of, no, never mind. No. Crystal Lady Jessica sent us the Luminous Fairies and Mothra.
Yay. What a pretty answer, you.
Thank you, Jessica. And then this weird podcast that I had never heard of before called the Power Trip Podcast sent us a weird.
It sounds like a podcast that does a lot of drugs.
Oh yeah. Those two hosts are definitely high every time they're on there. Mm-hmm.
This must have been sent by that other guy that I was talking about.
Yeah. Sent us a children's Power Rangers picture book called Heap of Trouble,
which I had as a kid. I don't have it now. It's probably at my parents' old house, but
apparently whoever sent this in has it because they must have stolen it from you because they sent in the picture.
I guess, or they just ripped it off of like an eBay listing. Who knows?
The Power Trip podcast is a member of the Kaiju Ramen podcast network, just like Kaiju Weekly. So, yeah, go listen to that if you love Power Rangers and you want to hear more about them. We also have our friends over at the Giant Monster BS podcast who sent us.
We haven't heard from these guys in a while.
I thought you were going to say we haven't heard from these jerks in forever.
No, I mean I haven't. I'm not. I wasn't.
I was thinking it, but I wasn't saying it.
Well, it's because it's because I'm the nice one. So yeah, our friends at Giant Monster BS send in an answer. It's the Boss Baby.
Boss Baby?
Okay.
Maybe a question. Boss Baby?
Boss Baby.
Boss Baby.
Boss
Baby.
Boss Baby. There we go. Channel my inner Elijah. Boss Baby.
Thank you guys for sending that answer in. And then another podcast that is also part of the Kaiju Ramen podcasting network, hosted by yours truly. I'm not going to be mean about this podcast because I'm the host of it. Sent in, this was Nathan again. He co-hosts this podcast, the Henshin Men podcast, that talks about Japanese superheroes and their high flying and high kicking adventures. Go listen to it if you like Kamen Rider, Ultraman, Super Sentai, all those things. Mostly Kamen Rider. We talk a lot about Kamen Rider.
Who totally ripped off our award system.
Don't you start with me. I should have copyrighted that so that you couldn't have stolen it. You stole it. That just means it was a good idea.
That actually was a good idea. It was it was a good idea stolen from another good idea. But we took it and made it better.
But the answer that was sent in was Babe, Pigmon in the City. That was very creative.
Pigmon in the city.
Very creative. I thought that was really good. That's why I included it. Nathan, you have now sent in like 5 answers. We're going to have to start limiting the amount of answers that you send in.
Well, technically 6.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we haven't even gotten to one yet. So, and then our friend Kaiju Kim, the queen of all things kaiju, has sent in Clifford's Big Adventure. Thank you, Kim.
No,
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'd much rather the running joke about Clifford than the other running joke, which is not to be mentioned since we didn't have an answer from a certain teenage podcast host who usually keeps that thing going.
Oh, never mind. You're talking about Yeti nipples.
There it is. If you're a new listener to this podcast, I'm very sorry. I am very sorry. And if you're a new listener,
not sorry.
If you're a new listener and you marathoned through all of that news and making it to this far, good on you. Wow.
I'm not sorry because we're almost at 20,000 downloads. So we must be doing something right.
I feel like we probably would have been double that by now if it wasn't for the Yeti nipples.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of what's dragging us down. I have to admit, but overall, I think it's our charming personalities.
I don't know who you're talking about because I don't have a personality. Anyway,
your personality is sleep.
My personality is tired. Yes. Chris, we had one episode where I didn't mention being tired. Our last answer is from Jimmy from Nassau, who sent in The Adventures of Jimbo in Space. Hence why it was a space opera. Get it? Okay.
Thanks. I love the Fozzie gif. Thank you, Jimmy from Nassau.
But our actual main topic for this week is Where the Wild Things Are from 2009. It was directed by Spike Jonze, and it stars Max Records, James Gandolfini, Paul Dano, Lauren Ambrose, Forrest Whitaker, Catherine O'Hara, and Chris Cooper. And do you have a funny plot breakdown? Because I have a funny plot breakdown.
I actually do not have a funny plot breakdown, Travis. Go ahead and read your funny plot breakdown.
Okay, so the plot breakdown for this episode, there's like this kid, his name is Max. He clearly has some emotional and psychological issues. Like he's dealing with maybe the death of his dad. We don't really know. The movie's not very clear on that. And, maybe he'd be good. It'd be a good idea to send him to a counselor or a family therapist or, some kind of professional who can help him cope with the overwhelming emotions that he's experiencing. But instead he throws dirt at some big monsters. The end.
He's lonely.
Yeah. He seemed like just a kid who has a lot of emotions, a lot of feelings that he's dealing with, feelings of abandonment, feelings of loneliness, and he doesn't know how to express those. And because his mom is working all the time and not really being super attentive to him and his needs, he's kind of acting out. And, and really, I thought as much as like he was acting out and like that was some very hard scenes to watch because I just wanted to smack the kid. Hello. But violence against children, not something I encourage.
It's okay. I have nieces and nephews. It's fine.
But while like it was hard to watch some of those scenes, I feel like this movie is so true to life. Like this is how children are when they are dealing with emotions. And we're getting into our opening thoughts now, because this is kind of my opening thoughts to this. Wow, I just have to applaud Spike Jonze, who really, because I did research, for this episode. He was the driving force behind this. Like, it's like sometimes, a lot of movies are always a collaboration, but like all of the things that made this movie what it is was decisions that Spike Jonze made, and then dug his heels in and said, I'm not changing it. Now, even when the studio put pressure on him, when other people said, you need to change this, it's not going to work, he dug his heels in and said, no, this is what I'm doing, this is what my vision is, and if you don't like it, then I'm not going to do it. And he stuck to his guns, and wow, he made a movie that captures what it really is like to be a kid dealing with those emotions. And it is such a hard thing to do. So many people fail at making movies that capture realistic emotions for children. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it's on purpose. Like a lot of times adults who making these movies don't really treat children's feelings and emotions as valid or worth.
Well, they talk down the kids.
Yeah, or they don't view them as valid. They talk down to them. They don't view them as worth exploring the emotions that children are experiencing. And the fact that Spike Jonze took this book that is not, it's a picture book that is about the size and length of The Very Hungry Caterpillar. There's nothing to this book, like as far as like depth, and he made a movie that was so deep and full of emotions. Wow, that is super ambitious, and he succeeded in doing something that I would have never imagined that they could have done.
This movie is definitely like an emotional roller coaster, I think, because this is an incredibly mature movie for it being a kids movie. And we talked about this in private. This really isn't a kids movie. Mm-mm. This is a very adult movie. And by adult, I don't mean like TVMA. I mean, it's a very mature movie told through the perspective of a child.
Yeah. I like how, and I forget who it was. It was one of the reviewers. It might have been Roger Ebert who reviewed this movie. I was looking at some of the other reviews after I had already watched it and made up my own review. I was looking at some of the other reviewers, and somebody said this movie is about childhood, but it is not a children's movie. And I thought that was such a brilliant way of putting it, because this movie stars a child. It focuses on a young child who is experiencing life and is told through his eyes and through his own imagination, but it is not necessarily aimed at children. It is aimed at adults who remember what it's like to be that child, to have those feelings, those emotions, and that kind of imagination, and experiencing the world in that way. So it is definitely about childhood, but it is not necessarily for children. But at the same time, I don't think that if you showed this to a child that they would be scarred for life. I think that they would probably be bored more than anything, because it's not as flashy or vibrant as like something that kids usually enjoy. So
no, it's really a drab. It's kind of a drab, like aesthetic. Just speaking aesthetically, it's kind of a drab, a little bit depressing looking movie.
I think, and this is getting kind of into our specific likes and dislikes, because this was a like that. It's a little bit of a like and a little bit of a dislike. So I don't know. I didn't know exactly where to put this, because the color palette that they chose for this is very drab. Like you said, there's a lot of browns, there's a lot of tans, there is a lot of oranges and vibrant oranges and stuff in it too. But it's a very different color palette than what you might see in other movies, especially movies that have the imagination of being a child. But I think that was done on purpose. And I'll tell you what I think the purpose for it was. I think the theme of this movie is meant to trigger some trigger real nostalgia. And I mean real nostalgia, not the manufactured nostalgia that we see used in advertising and movies and stuff nowadays, but real nostalgia. And I think that choosing the warm kind of tan and brown, orange, whatever you want to call it, color palette kind of makes the movie feel like a sepia toned film. And if you ever want to make things look older, or kind of like the like shortcut to nostalgia in like, you know, flashbacks and stuff, is use a sepia tone on things and use a sepia filter. I think that's what the color palette in this movie is meant to evoke. I don't know for sure because I didn't see that written down anywhere, but I feel like just watching this, that for me, the color palette actually adds to that kind of nostalgia, looking back on the past and, you know, and remembering what it was like to be that young and that imaginative.
Yeah. I like what you said, that this movie evokes like real nostalgia, because like we have all at some point been this like kid, this awkward child going through it, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like an emotional upheaval, but going through some stuff, and we either act out or we, you know, we lean really heavily into our imaginations to help us cope with something that's going on in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like this movie feels nostalgic. I get what you're saying, because you can kind of put, as the audience can put ourselves in Max's place, and kind of feel what he's feeling, this sense of wanting to feel important, to want to feel seen, which is why he makes up the whole story about being a king and being ruler over all these Vikings. Like, makes him to build himself up to be important and to mean something, and to feel less insignificant than he may feel, because again, his mom, she's a single mother. We don't know where the dad is at. We're led to believe that he has either passed away, or, you know, maybe he's the child of a divorce. It never goes into that, which I'm kind of glad it didn't, because there's a lot of this movie, and you and I talked about this a little bit last night, that there's a lot of this movie that's kind of left up to interpretation. And I like what they did here, but like, we can put ourselves in the place of this child that just wants to feel seen and wants to feel important and like he matters.
Yeah, and you're right that there's so much of this movie that is left ambiguous. Like we said, you know, the not knowing exactly where the father is. We know he's not in the picture. We know that Max wants him to be in the picture because he, you know, you see him look at something that his dad gave him. It even says on there, you know, about that it was from his dad, and that, you know, and so you can tell he misses his dad. But did his dad die? I mean, there is kind of hints there, because, you know, the way that Max kind of reacts when his teacher, side note, worst teacher ever.
Oh, it's terrible teacher.
Terrible, terrible teacher. You're teaching children and you're like, the universe is going to die and we're all going to be killed by our, you know, and we're just all going to disappear into the void of emptiness and space. And it's just like, you're teaching children. Stop it. But like, when the teacher mentions that, you know, the sun will die, you know, the sun will eventually die because everything dies eventually, is what, you know, how it was put. Yeah. And then later on, Max repeats that to Carol, one of the monsters. Carol. You know, he says, did you know the sun is going to die? And, you know, and so there's little hints there that death is on Max's mind, but it's not outright said that his dad is dead. It just, you know, so it is left ambiguous. There's things like the mother's job, what she does, you know, that's kind of left ambiguous. We know that it involves some kind of project that she has to get done. She has to work, and so she can't really spend
some kind of data entry. I'm assuming it's what it looked like when she was at her computer, which this has to be set sometime in the 90s or maybe even the 80s. I don't know.
No, that
But
computer definitely
she's
looked
at her
90s.
was it 90s? Okay. So
Yeah.
it looked like a 90s like desktop computer. She's definitely doing some kind of like data entry report, it seems like, but yeah, like she had, it just like what's really touching about that though is she still takes the time to open up a Word document, we'll say,
Mm-hmm.
and write down her son's stories, like his imagination, like
Mm-hmm.
whatever his imagination is coming up with in that moment, she writes those down for him. And she
Yeah.
does take that time to do so because you can tell that, she is a mom. She's struggling with probably what's going on with her because we meet, I guess it's her boyfriend because he calls her honey.
Mm-hmm.
This is definitely not a first date scenario. Sidebar, I did not know Mark Ruffalo was in this movie. It was kind of weird seeing him there.
Yep. I mean,
but
me and you came up with a nickname for him that I'm not going to repeat on this podcast, but I swear he has been the boyfriend of a divorced or widowed woman in like 5 or 6 different movies. He is always that guy.
I mean, he definitely has a type. We'll say that.
Yeah.
But I mean, it just kind of goes back to that like real nostalgia, of like not like wanting your parents' attention and them being too busy to give it to you. But maybe they take just a little bit of time throughout their day to do something for you. And that's something that I was kind of reflecting on.
She's not a bad mom. She's obviously not a bad mom. She's
No,
a mom who is busy.
Absolutely not.
And she's a mom who is struggling to balance things because she is a single mom trying to balance all of this. But she's not a bad mom. She is there and she's attentive. And also the realism also goes with the older kids, the teenagers, the older sister and her friends. The way that they react to Max is not to bully him or, to push him around.
They reacted in a way that I did not personally expect. When I saw the sister's friends pull up, I thought, okay, here we go. We're going to see the typical like sister's boyfriends and his friends are going to pick on her little brother. And it's going to be kind of heart-wrenching, but it's going to play into the plot of him wanting to run away or whatever. So the movie did really well at subverting my expectations in that moment.
Yeah. And that's what, and we expect that because that's the cliche that movies have done for a long time, but that's not the real world. That's not how older siblings react and treat their younger siblings. And that's not how older siblings' friends treat their younger sibling, the younger sibling. This is more realistic. Like they do kind of play with him a little bit, not much, but they do, they instead of getting mad at him, they throw snowballs back at him when he throws a snowball at them.
And it's not malicious. It's actually playful.
Yeah, it's playful. They're laughing, they're having fun and stuff. And the problem happens when they smash his igloo. And I have been, because for anybody who doesn't know, I like to describe myself as 2 kaiju fans by volume. I am a big guy. I am a really big guy. I have been a big guy for a long time. So I have been the bigger kid who has smashed something without realizing how attached the younger kid was to it. And so, it's like, I felt for the older kids a little bit more at that moment because, I'm not saying that Max overreacted. He reacted the way a kid his age would react, but also being the teenager or being the bigger kid who has been in that situation, I'm like, well, we were having fun. We were, we didn't mean to do something. We were just,
we got carried away. It happens.
Yeah. And so then they even ask, are you okay? Like they're not mean to him. And so I thought this was just such a wonderful thing, a wonderful way of doing this film, of just making it so realistic. Like the relationships between Max and his mom and his sister feel realistic. They're not antagonistic towards each other. They love each other, but you can tell that they're kind of living their own separate lives, and which, makes sense. The mom is busy. She has to take care of things. So she's kind of living her life. Max is in his own world, literally and figuratively, and the older sister has reached a point in her life where now she's outgrown a lot of the things that her and Max used to do together, and so she's trying to establish herself as a teenager, as an older kid. And so it's such a realistic thing. I keep saying realism and realistic so much, but that's just that's the only thing I can say about this.
You know what's also really realistic? The reaction from his mother when she realizes that he messed around in his big sister's room. She didn't yell. She didn't scream. She was like, Max, what did you do? Like, that was what the most she got. But you know what? She saw that Max was sorry for what he did. He felt bad for what he did. And she tried to help him fix it so that his sister wouldn't find out and be angry. Like that. Like, it's such a simple thing, because I can relate to that kid, Max, being young. Because my sister lived with us until I was probably around 6 years old. See, my sister is technically my half sister. So both my parents were married before they got divorced, and then got remarried, and then had me. But before that, my mom had my sister. So my sister is like 11 years older than I am, but she was still young enough to where she lived in the same house as me, probably until I was maybe 6 years old or something like that. She was a teenager. She was dating her husband at the time, maybe in getting ready to be married and all that. But I vividly remember those moments in the house of when I would get home from school and she wasn't home or something, and just me going in there and messing around in her room. And then my mom coming in, catching me. And instead of yelling, well, of course my mom probably yelled at me, but after she got done kind of scolding me, she helped me fix it. So my sister wouldn't flip out. Like, it sounds like a simple thing, but I think it plays into the realism that we're talking about here for this quote unquote kids movie that's not actually a kids movie.
Yeah. And it's such a weird thing, and it just shows how many of these movies that we generally, because there's plenty of movies out there that do deal with realistic things, but just how many of the movies that we watch, and how many of them, especially for the podcast, that don't deal with realistic issues and realistic emotions, that when we finally get one, we're just like taken aback by it, because we're like, whoa, a movie that's actually dealing with real issues and real things that kids actually have to deal with, and people and families have to actually deal with. It's like, this is, and it's not a monster that's destroying a city. I mean, that's not knocking the stuff that I love, the movies that we cover, on the podcast. And I love the type of movies that we cover, but it just goes to show how much we're soaked deep into this, the kind of fantasy, sci-fi genre that we're in, that doesn't typically do this kind of stuff, that when we finally get a movie that goes to,
it's like this, a brush. It's like taking a,
it's
like taking when you first wake up in the morning, your mouth is really dry, you've slept all night, and then you go to the kitchen and you get a glass of water, maybe put a little ice in it, and you just gulp that thing down. And it feels so good because your body has been deprived of that for the last however many hours you've slept. And that's what this movie feels like. Because like you said, we cover a lot of like good movies. And don't get me wrong, I love the movies we cover. Well, most of the movies we cover, I should say. I love most of the movies we cover. And we cover films that are just right in our wheelhouse. They are like big monster fights other big monster, smashes city, the end. Like, that's right in our wheelhouse. And they're a lot of fun, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when a movie like this comes along, and it does kind of, I guess, serve as a palate cleanser or a palate refresher for like these types of discussions. It is very noticeable. And that's why we're kind of lingering here just a little bit longer than we typically maybe would.
Yeah. Now let's talk a little bit about the actual monsters in this. So the monsters in the book, the Where the Wild Things Are, do not have names and do not have really identifiable personalities in it, because it's a short children's picture book.
Sure.
But
it's like 8 pages or 10, maybe even that.
Yeah. So they gave each one a different personality, a different name, and they did a really great job of developing them as characters. I really liked the combination of using the practical effects, the practical suits. These suits were built by the Jim Henson Company. You can tell they look like a Jim Henson.
You can tell.
Thing. But they use CGI on the faces to make them, move and speak and stuff in a more realistic way. So I thought that was just so fantastic. They looked and moved and felt real and tangible, because they weren't just CGI, things, in a computer. They actually were tangible things that the kid could be carried by or wrestle with or, push around or run from or anything like that. It was just so great. And I loved the voice acting in all of them. They were so great.
I think after I started the movie, I was like, it is so weird hearing the voice of Tony Soprano in this movie.
Yes. Yeah.
Like it was so weird. Like, what is it? James
Gandolfini.
What is his last? Gandolfini. Thank you. James Gandolfini, who's probably the most famous role is The Sopranos, but it was so odd hearing him in this movie. And I think it fit the character, or I should say the characterization fit his voice so incredibly well.
It did. And you know what? We had some really fantastic, we named a few of them, when we were going through the cast list. There's a lot of great actors who did the voices in this movie.
Forrest Whitaker.
Yeah, Forrest Whitaker. But James Gandolfini is the one that stood out the most, because he's the character that most represented Max and his emotions and his feelings and his angst, his acting out type personality. And the way that, like, James Gandolfini had to convey so many different emotions just with his voice, and he did a brilliant job with it. So he was the standout one for me.
Out of all the other ones, I thought Chris Cooper, that played Douglas, did like second best, just as kind of like the counter to, like, because the character of Douglas is kind of he's a little bit calmer, a little bit more measured, whereas Carol, played by James Gandolfini, is a little bit more emotional. Like he is, and this is kind of a weird thought I had throughout the movie, because we don't know if this is all in Max's imagination or if this is supposed to be real. And the film does a really good job towards the end, kind of leaving that up to interpretation. Mm-hmm. I sincerely thought that Doug the bird was the voice of whatever like therapist that his mom sent him to.
Yeah. Yeah. He does seem kind of like the voice of reason kind of in all of them.
Yeah.
I do like that the way that the monsters are, it's almost like each one represents not just a person that in Max's life, but also an aspect of his personality. With Carol being the biggest part of his personality. KW obviously was more represented his sister, but they did have a little bit of his own personality mixed in there. So yeah, it's just, it was great that how they were able to interpret these monsters that, like I said, in the book had no personalities and no distinguishing, they had distinguishing features in that they looked different, but there was nothing that separated them from each other. And then the way they interpreted them.
What if Douglas represented Max's dad?
Could have been.
Like, because Douglas seemed a little bit like he's kind of like that voice of reason. And the example that I'm thinking of specifically is when when Carol gets angry and rips off the arm of Douglas, which is really, and all of these creatures apparently have sand in them, which is odd, but okay. So he rips off the arm of Douglas, and Douglas is just like, oh, it's okay, it's fine. Like, he's kind of that calm voice of reason. So I'm wondering if Douglas wasn't his dad, like his kind of like pseudo like dad.
Yeah,
Maybe.
could have been, because you're led to believe that the one, I think it was Judith, whichever one had the loud voice, the kind of loud nagging voice that they were making fun of through a lot of it, that's meant to represent kind of his mom, because she yelled at him the last, before he ran away. And then if that's the case, then the one that she's in the relationship with, Ira, is more of like the boyfriend, Mark Ruffalo's character. So, who is kind of like more subservient and doesn't really have much to say or do, because, maybe Max doesn't know him as well. So there's not as much there for him to build a character from. So I really like the way that they did these monsters.
Which actually kind of makes me think, like, who is Alexander then, the goat? Like, I'm wondering who Alexander is in this story. If everyone in this, if all the monsters have kind of like their counterpart in real life that presumably that we may have met already, like KW is the sister, Judith is his mom, Ira is the boyfriend, Douglas is the dad, Carol is him. So Alexander would be, I don't know. Like, I don't know who Alexander would be. Like me.
I think a lot of these, and again, a lot of it might just be us kind of digging a little bit deeper than maybe was meant to be with like attributing some of these things, because I think a big part of it is that each of these characters is also supposed to represent part of his personality, not just the people that he in his life, but also aspects of his personality. So then you have the dichotomy of Carol, who's this big and loud and loves running around and destroying things, and when he's angry, he lashes out. And then you have Alexander, who's kind of shy and timid and weak, and nobody listens to him, and he doesn't know how to get people to listen to him and pay attention to him, because they mention that in the movie, like, nobody really listens to you. No, and I don't know how to make them listen to me. And it's like, that's Max. That's another part of Max's personality. So it's just kind of showing that there's two sides to Max. There's the side that is, angry and yelling and lashing out and biting his mom. Then there's also the side that's really sad and lonely and scared and just wants people to pay attention to him. And so you have these two. So both of these kind of are aspects of his personality. And it's just like, this kid really needs some therapy. This kid really needs a counselor of some kind.
Right. Yeah. I mean, but like, what's really charming about this movie is all, like, we probably are reading a little bit too much into it, honestly, than what it's meant to be. But I don't know. Maybe we're supposed to read into it. What's really fun about it is some of the more lighthearted scenes, because all of these monsters have a very like childlike personality to them. They're all full of this like childlike wonder at Max, because Max is unlike any other creature that they've met before. So like there is a lot of like childlike wonder to them, and some of those scenes, like when they're playing with the dirt clods and when they're building the fort and all this stuff is just really charming. Like there's a lot of like charm to this movie that makes it really enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. And it is ultimately, it feels like a fairy tale in the sense of, the kid goes on this grand adventure and in the process learns a lesson, because it feels like getting his own emotions out and having to deal with them in a very physical way, like actually having to interact with another being. I won't say a person, but another being that is acting the way he's acting, makes him start to reflect on his own actions and start to think about the way he's been treating others, the way he's been acting, and what he needs to do to adjust and stuff. And so he actually learns a lesson through all of this, and when he goes back home, he can take that lesson with him. And it's just a really just great journey that the character of Max goes on. This is one of those movies that there is so many layers and so much depth here that I think that we could talk forever about it. But I think we got our main points out of the way. We can get now to our final thoughts and our Godzuki scores. Because yes, listener, we like to rate our movies out of 5 Godzukis. Because we like to embrace the sillier side of giant monster movies, and we do that by using the great Godzuki as our yardstick for rating these movies. So, Michael, out of 5 Godzukis, how many Godzukis would you give Where the Wild Things Are, and what are your final thoughts?
I have seen this movie before, but it has been long enough to where going into it, I wasn't sure what to expect. I remember watching this movie around the time it came out. I don't know why I watched it, but I just remember watching it and thinking it was just kind of weird and boring. But now going back to it, I think it's a wonderfully deep movie. There's a lot of realism, like we've discussed, about the film. It is definitely not a kid's movie. It is a movie told through the eyes of a kid, or through the personality and through the troubles and through the emotions of a child. But this is not a child's movie. Like, this is not something I'm going to show my niece or nephew, because I just think they're going to be bored. It's not, like we said, it's not big and flashy and bright enough to keep their attention. There's a lot of layers to this movie. There's feelings of grief. There's feelings of anger, of very heavy, like sadness and forgottenness, like all those emotions that kind of run through you as a child, just trying to grow up. And like, this movie is nostalgic in, like, not the way that we normally talk about nostalgia. Like for me, like I talk about the nostalgia of Power Rangers and nostalgia of Godzilla. Like, that is a different nostalgia than what this movie represents. This movie represents all of the complex emotions that, we have as children, because, if you think about it, a child's life is not easy sometimes. And through, like, circumstances and things that happen throughout your life, sometimes a child has to grow up quicker than, maybe expected or maybe they should. And I think that's what's kind of happening here. Like, Max is a child who maybe is struggling with the feeling of, having to grow up a little bit too fast, because some bad stuff has happened to him in his life, and he doesn't know any other way to act out his emotions other than just putting on a white wolf suit and acting like a fool, running through the house, wrestling the dog, biting his mother, just acting out in that way. He doesn't know how to handle it. He just doesn't know. And so he creates this world for himself that he can escape to. And I think it's something a lot of us can identify with, especially if we really look back on our childhood and what our experiences were there. There's just a lot to unpack here. Although the monster designs are a little weird, because I was like, okay, so these are literal representations of what they looked like in the book, which is weird, but it works. Like,
yeah,
everything
they were
just
really
kind of
true
works
to
here.
what they looked like in the book, which,
right. Yeah.
They looked weird in the book,
for sure.
So.
Right. Yeah. It was just big and over the top. So, all things considered, I would definitely recommend this to somebody that wants just a good movie with a lot of heart and a lot of depth to it, but also can be fun.
You got to leave me some room to give my final thoughts too, Michael. So
I know. I'm going a little bit long. I normally don't go this long. So I'm just going to wrap it up and say, I'm going to go ahead and just give this thing 5 out of 5 Godzuki Spookies.
I like to write my final thoughts down, and you can read my final thoughts if you want to. Go back and read all of the ones I've written down before. If you follow us on Letterboxd, because I usually put my review down and my final thoughts down as the review for each movie that we cover on the podcast. So you can go back. I don't think I have every single one of them on there because there was a little break I took where I just wasn't posting anything on Letterboxd, but I've got a good bit of them on there. So you can go and check out all the movies that we've reviewed and what my final thoughts were on a lot of them on there. So, but anyway, here are my final thoughts for this. There's a category of movie that is about childhood, but isn't necessarily meant for kids. These movies capture the truly nostalgic feeling of being a kid and going on adventures, exploring new worlds, meeting strange beasts, all without leaving your own yard. Where the Wild Things Are captures true nostalgia, not the manufactured kind that gets toted around or exploited by many filmmakers today. There's a nice balance of wonder, humor, and intense moments. It reaches deep down and conveys strong, sometimes dark, emotions and is not afraid to convey those feelings in a realistic way. Director Spike Jonze takes the often overlooked approach that kids' emotions are valid. The combination of artistic, practical effects, skillful CGI, and faultless voice acting give each of the Wild Things a unique appearance and personality. It's not necessarily meant for kids, like we said, but it is a beautiful movie that will warm the heart of anyone who remembers being a child full of emotions and imagination. And with that, I give it a 4.5 out of 5. I'm trying to be a little bit stingier with my 5 out of 5s because I feel like I've been a little bit more loose in the past with them. I might adjust this. I mean, this is like very close to the border of being a 5 for me too. Like there's very few things I have a problem with, and most of them are very nitpicky things. So this is very close to being a 5. But I just gave it a 4.5. Godzookies. This episode's running kind of long because, like I said, there was a lot of news to cover, a lot to dive into with this movie. So we're going to skip the mailbag this week, but we do want to finish answering Chris Degelman's email that he sent us. We started last week answering it. We're going to answer some more questions because he sent us like 3 questions, I think. So we wanted to answer some more, but we're going to do that next week. But you can also send us some mailbag questions that we can read out on the podcast if we don't run too long talking about the movie, because Michael won't shut up. You can do that by sending it to our email, kaijuweekly@gmail.com, or you can tweet it to us at kaijuweekly on Twitter, and we will read it out on a future episode of the podcast. Make sure to do that. We love hearing from you guys. Send us some stuff in our mailbag. But yeah, the only thing to do for this episode is to ask the trivia question to hint to next week's episode. We're continuing our feel-good February because we're just covering all these movies that are supposed to be feel-good movies. And so keep that in mind as you answer the question, what film by director Bong Joon-ho created controversy at the 2017 Cannes Film Festival? Send us those answers, and we're going to post that on our social media, so you can look for it on our social media and answer it there. And now we're going to say thank you to everyone for listening and sharing this podcast with your friends. If you want to follow us on social media, so all the links to our social media, as well as for the Kaiju Groupie Facebook group, are listed in the description of this episode. You can send questions, comments, or answers to our trivia questions to our email, kaijuweekly@gmail.com. Want to say a big thank you to everyone who has supported Kaiju Ramen Magazine so far. Yeah, if you want to find out more about the magazine, the volume, all of that stuff, or any of the other podcasts in the Kaiju Ramen Podcast Network, you can check out the website, kaijuramenmedia.com.
Yeah, and there's one more thing, Travis, they can do to help support this show, and that is by going to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leaving us a 5-star rating or review. And if you do that, it's going to help this show grow, and it's going to help put this show in front of other kaiju, tokusatsu, and Wild Thing fans, other Wild Things out there. I don't know where I'm going with that. It's getting late here. and just going to help us grow. It's going to help us like do other great projects. It's going to help us get a little bit of exposure for Kaiju Ramen Podcasting Network with everything that we've got going on here at Kaiju Ramen Media. And we would just really appreciate it if you do happen to leave us a review, we'll read it on a future episode of the podcast. We've actually got a few reviews that we still need to read out. We may get around to those eventually, but we would just really appreciate it.
And yeah, so to close out this podcast, I'm going to say help control the wild thing population. Have your Carols spayed or neutered. Wild thing.
Wild thing.
You make my heart
You make
sing.
my heart sing. You make everything groovy.
Groovy, baby. Okay. Bye.
A hunk of burning love. Okay, anyway.
That has nothing to do with what we just talked about.